SJ. Welcome to Mvskoke Radio, your weekly source for tribal and community news, interesting guests and discussions, plus a local events calendar. SJ Stongo Gary Fife Joho Jifkados Mvskoke Radio Mabuhedjit. Welcome to our program again on another beautiful Oklahoma Okmulgee day. Lots of sunshine for the day, and then weather will get a little nasty later on. A couple things we'll be sharing with you this morning. First of all, we're going to be speaking with a woman who works at the Department of Energy and has been battling some activity there that, the word is racist, about using their mascots and attitudes up there, and she was fighting against that and prevailed, so that's kind of nice. And in the second portion of our program, we will be speaking to our old colleague Sarah Deer, who has another national award to add to her collection. But we're going to enjoy chatting with her. It's been a little bit. But let me get our first guest on, and we're going to be off and running. Good morning, Jody Tallbear. Are you with us this morning?
Good morning, Gary. I'm here.
Okay, great. Appreciate you making time. You're in the nation's capital, is that correct?
I am. Yes, I am, although I'm teleworking, as most of us are right now. So I'm sitting on my deck, and it's beautiful green trees.
Ooh, that sounds
so I hope
nice.
it doesn't get too windy, so you don't get wind noise.
Yeah, well, I'm sitting here in a nice little toasty radio studio, soaking up all the heat from all these machines. So lots of fun. Enjoy it for the both of us. Let's get down to business here now. Reason we were talking with you today is you won a significant victory in a battle against the Department of Energy over the issues of mascots and some attitudes over there. So first of all, let me get some information about you, your title, your responsibilities, and let's add your tribe too.
Sure. So I'll start with the tribe. I'm an enrolled member of the Cheyenne Arapaho tribes of Oklahoma, but I'm also eligible for enrollment in the Sistenwapton-Oyate, which is a Sioux tribe up in the northeast corner of South Dakota. Was raised mostly with my Sioux family on a couple of reservations in South Dakota, but also spent some time in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. I am currently the chief of the Civil Rights Division at the Department of Energy. That's a position that I've held, I think, since September of this past year. Prior to that, I was an attorney at the department, and at the time that my lawsuit started, I was a strategic initiatives and policy advisor to the director, a Senate-confirmed appointee at the Department of Energy, and removal from that position was really what spurred my lawsuit. So I currently do civil rights work. It's not the chosen career. It's not the career that I came to Washington, D.C. to do, but because of the incidents that took place that prompted my lawsuit, it's where I find myself now. When I first came to the department, I came as a visiting fellow to work on tribal energy issues and also Native American policy issues. But when I spoke up against the presence of the Washington football team mascot in the workplace, I was retaliated against by my director at that time, and so that's kind of what kicked off the lawsuit. Well,
that's kind of ironic that you would be punished, so to speak, for actually doing the job that you were hired to do. Is that kind of the way it shakes out?
I think there's a lot of irony in this case, which is one of the reasons that I think it's interesting. There have been, I think, three to four, pretty large articles on it, and I think one of the things that's interesting to the people that aren't, obviously there's interest in Indian country around it, but to the people that are, that care about kind of federal government and so forth. It's very ironic that the person that retaliated against me was actually the senior most civil rights official for the Department of Energy. The Office of Civil Rights actually was one of the offices that reported to her, and so there's irony in that way too. I guess to her, what she would say about it, and this was actually, she put this in email. It helped my case a lot that she was someone who didn't have the, I think, good forethought to not put things in email. But her position on it was that you speaking about controversial issues such as this would put my position with the White House. She was an Obama political appointee, would put my position in jeopardy. And she likened me speaking out on this issue to LGBTQ people advocating for same-sex marriage, or African-American people speaking regarding the Confederate flag. And so she really said that those were all kind of equal, which for even those other communities, I don't think that that's the position that the senior most civil rights official should have.
Right. Now, let me ask you a couple things here that might be a little weird, I guess. Now, I worked in that city for about 11 years and, had lots of friends and socialized and things, and became a fan of the football team, but I never cared for that name. And just mentioning the fact that I didn't would bring instant snarls of anger from even people I considered friends. Now, are the people that you're, I guess, battling against, are they very strong fans of that football team?
I think times have changed. Maybe I don't know how long ago you were here. I do think that there's more sensitivity these days than there used to be. But I will say what really prompted me to advocate on this, because I had no intention of moving to Washington, D.C. and waging a battle against the Washington football team. I had recent law school graduate, wanted to help tribes utilize their energy resources. I was very, committed to doing that, not to fighting this issue. But what kind of really brought it to the forefront for me was that in the office that I was in addition to there being, civil rights attorneys there were also diversity and inclusion specialists who were supposed to be experts in, identifying images and terms that are offensive to people, and then, advocating for them. So I thought that I would be surrounded by people who would get this, but when I would, the first time that I really saw kind of the blatant hypocrisy by these so-called diversity experts was November is Native American Heritage Month for federal agencies, and they were planning, I think it would have been the 2011 Native American Heritage Month event, and they wanted to combine it with a combined federal campaign event. And the theme for that event was football. And so they encouraged people to show up in their favorite team's football gear. And so obviously it was Washington football stuff all over the place. I know that you may not want me to say this word, but I kind of have to say it to get the point across. So there was Redskins stuff all over the place, and this was a Native American Heritage Month event organized by diversity officials, and they could not see how crazy that was. And when I would bring it up and kind of show it to them, I'd be in meetings sitting around a table with very high-level attorneys, civil rights officials, diversity people, political appointees, and they would look at me like I had two heads, and they would all just kind of poo-poo me and say, "Oh, but Jody, we don't mean it like that. That's not how we mean it. We're honoring Native people." And so, I got to the point where I could not speak up about it. Because I think silence, especially when you're an attorney, you're in a federal agency, and people are making these statements, if you don't speak up, your silence is acquiescence, or your silence is approval of their positions. And so I really feel like, I was forced into responding. Part of the reason was because of where I was situated in the agency.
Now, that I think you've kind of alluded to some of the examples, but are there other things that you could point to that kind of ticked you off, so to speak? You mentioned, the regalia. I should imagine that's football jerseys and posters and miniature helmets and this sort of thing, and then some attitudes that you ran across. So, are there examples that you can bring up that would just pushed you over the edge?
Well, I think that a lot of the things that pushed me over the edge were the things that I had just mentioned. Just that these are supposed to be experts who, at one moment, we're talking about, because of what the office did, we're talking about promoting cultural sensitivity for all groups, and all groups bring value, and then in this next breath saying, but except for Native people. There was one time there was a civil rights attorney who I still work with. He actually reports to me now. Who was in the building? There was a Subway, the restaurant chain Subway was the official team, or the Washington team was the official team of that chain in this area. And so when the team would win, they would run Redskin specials. And so I've had flyers left on my desk, saying Redskin special, and I would pick it up and walk in there and say, what are you doing? And they're just like, oh, well, Tallbear, I thought you would want to, have a, get a deal on a sandwich today. And I'm like, no. There are people that walk around with lanyards. There are posters in the building. The store used to sell some kind of propaganda. Again, the fact that they would allow it at organized events like that CFC event that took place during Native American Heritage Month. It's very institutionalized in a way that you would never see racialized images and racial language for any other group. And sometimes I would say to people, well, what if I just liked Aunt Jemima and I just had Aunt Jemima posters all over my office? Do you think that would be a problem? And they're like, oh, of course not, but that's different. And so I think it's, when I would offer up examples and try to get people to see that you're singling out Native people for treatment that you would never, single out other groups for, because that type of racism and stereotypical images and racial slurs are readily, seen, and they're just apparent to people. But people just don't see Native American people like other people. They honestly, I think, that believe that there's a different standard that should be applied to Native people when it comes to racialized language and images and stereotypical images of us. Right.
Those are old phrases and arguments that I'm sure both of us have heard most of our lives. That the old we're honoring you. Almost said an icky word there, but things that we don't particularly care for. Now, how far up? Now, it sounded like this was condoned office-wide, and to do that, you would have to have some sort of approval from senior officials. Now, did you get some idea of how far up that chain this approval or support went for these kind of things?
Well, so yes, there was, I should say before I filed the lawsuit, right, because I joined the department in 2010, May of 2010, became a federal employee in 2011. My suit was not filed until December of 2015, okay? So there was 4 years within there where I wanted to avoid filing an EEO complaint, avoid filing a lawsuit. I didn't want to ruin my relationship with my agency at all. And so I, started making myself available to be a speaker for Native American Heritage Month. And so probably since 2013, up until even this past November, I'm still a keynote Native American Heritage Month events, multiple ones every year. And the presentation that I give talks about it's called challenges to achieving Native American inclusion, which is a kind of a federal buzzword about understanding and appreciation for Native Americans. And I say that there are two major challenges in this part of the country. Scarcity, there's not a lot of Native people out here, as you probably remember when you were here, but then also just false representations, right? Most of the images of Native people that are out there in the media are, us riding on horseback 150 years ago, or as a team mascot, right? And so, or an Indian maiden, Pocahontas, etc. And so my presentation, which is very well received, kind of dissects all of these different images of Native people. And so I had to, when my director found out I was giving a presentation that included discussion of Indian mascots, this is when she started retaliating against me. And I had to go to the Office of General Counsel, and I showed them my presentation. And they said at that time, you cannot give this presentation in this building. There are images in here of other ethnic groups as mascots. I'm sure you're familiar with this image where it says it's like the Cleveland Indians mascot, and then there's a Cleveland Asians, Cleveland Africans, Cleveland Hispanics. It's been around probably for 30 years. Right. But I show that because it gets people to see, they're desensitized to Indian mascots, but it gets them to see how you feel when you see another group as that. And so when I showed them that, they told me, you cannot show this in this building. You're going to open us up to lawsuits, because we can't have other ethnic groups be shown as mascots in this building. And I started laughing, and I was like, but you allow, a business downstairs to put up posters that has my ethnic group as a mascot. And so I tell you that story to say that General Counsel, and they don't do anything unless it's vetted, and I had a final decision from them, so at least went up to the General Counsel, the actual General Counsel. Did they brief the Secretary on it? I don't know. But it was a very high-level decision that said that I could not give that presentation in my official capacity, and I couldn't ever give it in the building. And to this day, I don't believe that I can give it in the building.
That sounds, like repression, really. They were afraid of perhaps offending those people who might have had some connections to these teams or something like that. Is kind of what comes into the back of my mind is somebody doesn't get their exclusive VIP box and seat if this happens.
Right. Well, I think, Gary, I think it's that, but I also think it's that to mascot an entire ethnic group is on its face racist. And so they're like, we're not going to allow you to put up an image that's racist against African Americans or racist against Hispanics or racist against Asians. But for whatever reason, you have to deal with it for your ethnic group. Because I think when you look at that, at mascots that aren't Native people, you can immediately see that, that's probably not okay.
Right. Now, when you describe that kind of thing, and one of the images that comes to my mind was an old poster that had like team pennants on it, the kind that you put on a stick and wave in the air. But it had like something like New York Jews and California wetbacks, and then all of a sudden there's Washington R-skins, and
right.
That's kind of what comes to mind when an old memory, that is still with me. That did you see that kind of thing? I mean, did it get to that extreme?
What do you mean, like people showing that particular image? Or I don't understand the question.
Well, that particular image is going to be pretty hard to find unless you find it in somebody's collection. But did people, really push it to the point where, you get the fake feather headdresses and the woo stuff? And
no, I never saw anyone show up like they might go to a game. No, I never did see that.
Did this controversy spill out beyond the office? I mean, did it affect you, I guess, in your personal life? Did you have to deal with it on that level?
I haven't. I know that, like, I've heard, like, Amanda Blackhorse gets kind of like hate mail on Facebook and so forth. But I don't think that my case is so widely known outside of kind of federal government circles. Even in civil rights circles, I don't know that is that well known. So no, I haven't received any kind of hate mail or, expressed anger towards me personally related to this.
Well, that's good, but
yeah,
I have to, being the skeptical person I am, I'm sure there's some attitude out there. Now, this case, I believe, was decided back in March of this year. Is that right?
Well, so it wasn't decided, and I do have to clarify when you say, I won it. The case settled, right? So we filed in D.C. Circuit in January of 2017. For a very long time, we were just waiting for a judge to pick it up. We had one judge, then it was reassigned, and the final judge that it sat with is a Trump appointee. Her name is Dabney Friedrich. She looked at the case, and she pretty much eviscerated the majority of my case because I was alleging hostile work environment and also retaliation. So alleging that me having to work in an environment where there are racialized images and racial slurs, where it's pervasive, was creating a hostile work environment for me. She outright dismissed that. That if we had continued in this court fight, we would have appealed that and gotten those claims reinstated, and we were confident that we could have done that. But she brought DOJ's argument that, people aren't basically pointing at me and saying, you redskin. It's a passive display that has nothing to do with me. Therefore, it couldn't create a hostile work environment. She bought that argument from them. Obviously, I disagree. But so anyway, she, dismissed most of it, but the retaliation claim was still intact. And so throughout last year, we were going through discovery where, we get documents from the department and then we submit documents back to them. And the claim that once we got through discovery, there were a few pretty damning emails where I think DOJ, who represented the agency, realized she's going to prevail on this because it was retaliation. I mean, the former Obama appointee, her name is Dot Harris, put in email, denied Jody's detail opportunity because of her current issue. And so there was some pretty damning stuff in there. But so I think when DOJ saw that, they realized that if we got to a jury trial, I was going to prevail on that. And so we began negotiations, and we finally settled. And so I didn't, actually win. I can say I was awarded a very significant settlement. But anyone who kind of, reads under how the department or how federal agencies settle things, a $200,000 settlement is very significant. And it generally means that there was something really, really, egregious that took place, and there's some really good evidence to prove that it took place. And so I can't say when, but I can say, I was awarded a large settlement. It was a very difficult decision for me to settle, though. If I hadn't settled, I wanted to get a jury verdict that says that exposing Native American people to, racialized images and depictions in their workplace creates a hostile work environment. I wanted to get law laid down that did that, but when I settled, I foreclosed being able to achieve that. But we were probably looking at a court battle for, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, who knows. And, to be honest with you, it's very draining to be involved in litigation. It takes a very personal and spiritual and physical toll on you. And I just needed, to get it behind me. I really do appreciate you reaching out and other news outlets reaching out because, me kind of taking this on from the very beginning has really been about educating people. And so I think, we're on the record now and federal agencies are aware that you could face liability if you subject, federal employees, Native American federal employees to these images.
Let me ask you this now, since the release I have is dated March 11th,
Okay.
and so that's where I'm looking to get this
Yeah, I don't
information.
recall the exact date, but yeah.
Right. Now, since that settlement was reached, have things changed? I mean, policy-wise or attitude-wise, or the kind of assignments you're getting? Is that a positive move there, or is it sort of status quo?
It's status quo, but I will. I mean, nothing has really changed since I reached the settlement, other than I've been able to kind of get that, drop that weight that I had been carrying for so long. But I lost my career. So, the adverse action, which is when you file a discrimination complaint, is that there was some adverse action taken by someone because of you engaging in protected activity. Me engaging in protected activity was filing this complaint and advocating for the civil rights of Native people. And that career was taken from me back in December of 2015. I used to be a recognized leader at the department that led tribal engagement and Native American outreach for the office that I'm in. I used to be a policy advisor. I used to travel around the country and speak at events. I used to do a lot of things that I no longer do. And so I was isolated for about 3.5 years. And she blocked many other offices tried to pick me up to have me continue to do my tribal and Native American engagement work, but she blocked them. And so that's where and we can prove that. But so I lost my career, but that happened many years ago. Since that time, I had to make a decision to have a different career. And so I now do civil rights work. I'm oversee a group of civil rights attorneys at the Department of Energy. And so that changed, kind of gradually over the last few years. But no, I lost a career that I no longer have.
Has that gap been filled? The position you previously occupied
No.
and the work it's just an empty office, so to speak.
No, that position has not been filled. The reason that I was hired into that office was because to do specifically tribal and Native American work, and there is nobody there that does that now.
What a loss! That's
yeah.
My gosh. Well, you mentioned another career after federal service. I presume you're going to have to find another way to make a living. So what occupies your time now? What do you do as a profession in that civil rights capacity?
Well, I'm still at the Department of Energy. So I was promoted into this position that I'm in now, which is the chief of the Civil Rights Division at the Department of Energy. So I'm still there.
Did you get any support from any of the Native organizations? NCAI comes to mind, NARF, your own tribe. Did anyone step up to the plate there?
I got the most support from the Society for American Indian Government Employees. I don't know if you're familiar with SAGE, but they, provided moral support and definitely moral support. But they also drafted a letter to President Obama a few years ago asking that he direct OPM to not allow Indian mascot paraphernalia in federal buildings. So there was support from them in that way. I did not get any support from NCAI. I mean, I didn't really reach out. Native American Rights Fund, when I was looking for representation, I did reach out to NARF. But I think what they told me was that they are no longer doing mascot work, and not in a dismissive way. I mean, they were very, morally supportive, but they're just saying that that's not our focus right now. But yeah, I mean, I was represented though by Washington Lawyers Committee on Civil Rights, which is a big nonprofit here in Washington D.C. And I reached out to them, and they looked at the case, and they're like, yeah, I think we want to take this up. And then Kilpatrick Townsend joined them, and they both provided me with pro bono representation.
Okay, well, going to wrap this up now. I presume life is better for you. You can take the knot out of your stomach and kind of enjoy life now.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely can. If it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. I don't think there's any truer words than that. And so I try to focus on, the strength that I've gained from this. And I'm just glad that at least some people realize now that, hey, maybe it's not okay to set up different standards for Native people.
Right. I'm sure that mascot battle. Yeah, I'm sure that mascot battle is going to continue for years. We've seen it for decades now, and it's not done yet. Well, Jody Tallbear, thank you so much. Congratulations on reaching this settlement and making DOE aware that the Indian people aren't going to roll over and just take it anymore. And so we're very proud of you, and I wish you much success.
Thank you, Gary.
All right. Thank you, Jody. Have a good one.
Bye.
Jody Tallbear with the Department of Energy. We're going to congratulate her. We're proud of her, of course. We'll take a short pause here, and then we'll be back with segment 2 of our program and talk to an old friend, Sarah Deer. So stay with us here on Mvskoke Radio on The Brew.
I started doing it when I was 11. I wanted to be just like my big brother. And some of my friends were already doing it. We got hooked fast. I just can't get enough. I'm Jacob, and I'm addicted to playing the drums.
There's lots of stuff that makes it cool to be Native. Doing meth isn't one of them. Find something better to do. Check out ncai.org. A message from the Partnership for a Drug-Free America and the National Congress of American Indians.
Okay, we've got our little phone connection dealt with. Sarah Deer, are you there, I hope? Okay. Well, for our listeners, we hope you will be patient with us for some reason. We could not make that connection happen. Anyway, we've got you on the horn. It's good to talk with you again, and every time I do, it's because you've just garnered another incredible bit of recognition, and this time it's a Carnegie Fellowship, right?
Yes.
Now, for folks who aren't familiar with that particular recognition, kind of give us an idea what the Carnegie Fellowship is all about.
Sure. Well, it's a fairly new award that the Carnegie Foundation in New York has created, and they select about 25 people each year to receive the fellowship. But you have to be nominated by your campus, by your university where you work. So I was fortunate; they can only nominate 2 people. So I was very, very lucky that the University of Kansas tapped me to apply. But there were over 350 applications and only funded, like I said, I think 25 this year. So it was a long shot, and I'm really excited. I was shocked to see that they had selected me, and what it does is it offers me a chance to focus solely on writing, take a break from teaching, which is a heavy load, and focus solely on writing for 2 years. And so it's a very, it's like getting a 2-year sabbatical, basically. It's an incredible opportunity.
I could use one of those myself, I think.
Right?
Now, this fellowship comes in what is increasingly a longer line of awards that you've been receiving and recognized for. Now, besides the personal honor that you're carrying there, do you feel like you're kind of carrying the flag for other Native people, and particularly women in the various fields that you work with?
I do. I think that I don't think they've tapped very many Native scholars for this particular award. And so I do feel, I have to represent, show that the work that I do is relevant to a larger society, and that my work on Native women's issues in particular is kind of what captured their attention, I think, because I'm really wanting to focus on how Native women and others think about what tribal nations should look like in the future. And we always focus on the negative and the past. So this gives me an opportunity to do something that's very uplifting and positive and forward-thinking.
You've been recognized, and gosh, I'm using that word with you a lot lately, for your work in advocacy for Native American women. I would guess that's kind of a never-ending struggle at this point still. How would you describe the state of the nation if you were going to look at how Native women are perceived in our society, how they're treated, standing up for their own rights, a lot of different things there. So how would you put that all together?
Well, I think what's going to be critical for this book project is that I talk to Native women from all different kinds of spaces. I don't just want to talk to Native women who have college degrees or graduate degrees. I also want to talk to Native women who may not have that college degree, but have a great deal of knowledge and passion about their tribal government and also the surrounding nation. I mean, part of my inspiration was two Native women being elected to Congress last year. And I thought, this is the stories that we should be talking about. I wrote an entire book about sexual violence, and I wanted to write something different this time, something more uplifting. So I'll be talking to Native women all across the nation, small tribes, big tribes, law degrees, no degrees. I really want to capture a wide spectrum of perspectives as we think about our futures.
You mentioned you want to speak with a lot of I guess we would call them grassroots Native women around the nation, but I would presume here in Creek country. Is the story you hear from them particularly different from those who may have those college degrees? I mean, is there some sort of separation or a void there, or are they essentially saying the same things?
Well, I haven't started that part of the research yet, so I don't want to sort of pre-decide, what the work will look like. But I do know that some of the people who've taught me the most about federal Indian law, I learned it in law school, but that's a very different kind of place to think about it. And when I talk to Native women, about, I have actually learned, I think, more about tribal sovereignty from folks that aren't in law schools teaching it, but live it every single day and have a lot of intellectual thoughts about what needs to happen moving forward. So I don't know for sure what the outcome of the book will be. I want to really hear from my, my friends and colleagues who think about tribal sovereignty and gender and the future of our tribal nations. And I also want to talk to Native women from all different regions of the country. So Alaska, California, Midwest, Southeast, Northeast, Southwest. So I get a wide spectrum of perspectives.
You just described a pretty wide perspective right there.
Yeah.
The idea that Native women are more increasingly standing up for themselves and their cultures and their children's and families and things is such a bright spot for me to see that happening. And, of course, when someone like you, of course, gains this recognition, it means that all of a sudden, the greater society is taking more, paying more attention and wanting to, I guess, perhaps assist or support you in your work. Do you feel like you've seen change or perhaps participated in making change? Is everything still the same?
No, I mean, we've made such great strides in both getting Native women elected to various offices, tribal, state, and national. And so I think that there is sort of a changing of the tide. We're invisible as Native people, right? We're invisible to the larger society, but now we have people holding public office. And I'm really curious to see what Native women can bring to their positions as politicians. I just talked to a young Navajo woman here in Lawrence who's only 27 years old, and she's going to run for the Kansas House. And it's so exciting to see that kind of energy come into the work. She actually has a master's in public health, so she's particularly interested, and she's going to run here in Kansas. That's her home. She brings a really important perspective about public health, especially given the times that we're living in.
Right, when public health is commanding the news headlines and all sorts of little intricacies are starting to show up connected to those issues and things like that. Now, as our society evolves, then do you think the attitudes of of men have been evolving also? We all were aware of the man rules his castle kind of thinking back in the Fred Flintstone days, but things. I believe strongly that that's not the same anymore. And men are more educated, more accustomed to change and paying more respect. That's my thoughts. Now, how would you probably look at that same kind of thing?
I totally agree. I think that, and Native men are victimized at very high rates as well. So it's a problem just generally for everyone. Statistically, the rates of violence for all Native people is extremely high. But I will say it's been very, very gratifying to see the number of men who stand up and support Native women publicly and treat Native women with respect and support. And I think that's happening. I think that there's a lot of Native men involved in the anti-violence work that is going on and speaking out and talking to their fellow male tribal members and maybe passing new legislation and laws that will provide more protection for everyone in the community.
Now, you mentioned laws, and that actually was my next question. The Violence Against Women Act, VAWA, was hailed as a significant turning point in dealing with and supporting and protecting Native women from aggressors, perpetrators, criminals who might have wanted to take advantage of them or worse. Now, how do you see VAWA as an effective? Is it an effective tool? Does it need more teeth and more money? How would you put it?
I think it always needs more teeth and more money. What we were able to achieve back in 2012 was a partial Oliphant fix. So tribal nations that choose to can now prosecute non-Indians. But only for cases of domestic violence between two adults. So we still, as tribal nations, don't have criminal jurisdiction over non-Indians who commit any other crime, including murder, child sexual abuse, and the like. So what we're doing with our new effort to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act is asking Congress to consider whether or not tribal nations should be able to prosecute any non-Indian who commits an act of violence, including violence against a tribal police officer. That's been a problem from what I understand. And so I want to continue working to educate Congress and educate senators in particular about why tribal courts are so important and why tribal courts are capable of fairly prosecuting non-Indians. There seems to be a little suspicion or fear that tribal nations can't be fair for some reason, and I'm not sure where that belief came from, but it's really pronounced, especially on Capitol Hill when I talk to senators and their staff. They really don't feel comfortable for some reason with tribal control. So it's a long educational curve that we have to engage in, so we can address their stereotypes and their confusion about what tribal courts are and how they operate in today's society.
That raised a couple of points in the back of my head there when you mentioned those kind of connections and the tribal police. Now, they're coming from a society that is a tribal society and not necessarily like the rest of the dominant society here in the United States. Family connections and things like that are still very tight. Yeah. Say, well, my uncle is chief of police, so, if you mess with me, I'm going to have him get you. Things of that basic stupidity, I think. And it's something that our tribes have been trying to deal with and overcome, so to speak. So how would you suggest perhaps we deal with a cultural situation there, like when police is family or a police officer has to prosecute someone who is part of the same family also, a niece or a nephew or a grandpa or something like that. How do we deal with those connections? Any thoughts?
Yes, I mean, this is really a problem, especially with very small tribes like in California, where there's maybe 100 to 200 members. And setting up a criminal justice system in some of those communities seems a little daunting because everyone is related to each other. And so what I've seen happen are these consortiums where several tribes, say 6 California tribes, come together and create a court system that sort of applies to a series of different small rancherias. And that helps to some degree to address the concern about we don't want to lock up our relatives, which I think is valid. But really, there's corruption and nepotism everywhere. There are non-tribal police who do favors for people, and they're caught sometimes, and yet we don't talk about taking jurisdiction away from those situations, right? But when it's a tribal nation, that's sort of a double standard. So if you see a tribal nation, and I don't want to suggest that I'm in favor of corruption and nepotism, but when you see that happen, there's an instinct, I think, among some lawmakers to say, well, see, the tribal court's corrupt, the tribal police are corrupt, and that's used as a justification for removing or continuing to deny jurisdiction. But you don't see that with state and federal courts, right? You're allowed to make mistakes in your system and not have your jurisdiction stripped. So that's the challenge, I think, is the double standard.
The project you're working on is, quote, has a particular focus on Native women and how they conceive and work toward more democratic societies. Now, how will, I guess, your methodology address those topics, and what kind of product are you looking for?
Well, the end product will be a book. The title is yet to be determined, but it'll be based on my interviews about not just, running for office in state and federal elections, but also more and more Native women running for office at the tribal level. And for a lot of tribes now, the majority of the council is women. And I don't think you saw that, 15, 20, 30 years ago. So I'm really interested in talking about the democracies that Native women see at the tribal level. And, maybe we can do democracy better. I mean, democracy in general in the United States has received a lot of critique. And so, I'd really like to see how not only tribal women think about these issues, but also how it can inform and teach other governments how to create more democratic societies. And that's the thing that I don't think we talk about enough, is why are we always have to, take the lead from the state and federal authorities in terms of how we draft laws and constitutions, but maybe they should take a step back and learn from the tribes for once. And that's what gets me the most excited, is what we can offer, not just to our own communities, but what we can offer to the world in general.
You mentioned the strength of Native women in assuming governmental posts. I think instantly my mind went to women like Wilma Mankiller, who was such a wonderful person and leader and so brave. But it goes back even further. I remember as pretty much as a kid working in D.C. and meeting women who essentially ran tribes like Lucy Covington and some of the women from the Lakota nations. And so it goes far back and into our histories, so to speak. Women, were sitting in on councils that made big decisions on whether the tribe was going in a particular direction or they went to war even. So do you see that same kind of a person, that same kind of a deal here in our Native societies today?
Absolutely, and I especially was inspired by Standing Rock. Standing Rock was, a point of visibility for Native women. Native women, were really thinking hard about how to deal with that pipeline, and have learned a lot. And those are the kinds of people I'd like to talk to, is how did you create this sort of, camp or this community in light of everything negative that was happening? And I find those stories inspirational, and I'd like to help tell some of those stories.
Right, and people out there in that North Dakota winter time is, oh my
Right.
gosh, ouch. As we try to overcome some of the challenges we are still dealing with, is there a problem or a challenge that comes to mind that might be the greatest or something we still are stuck with?
I think in large part, I think there's been a lot of interesting discussions around COVID and universal health care. We have this disparity where poor people and people of color and tribal members are at high risk, right, for contracting COVID and then unfortunately passing from it. And I think this is the perfect time to start saying, is this the kind of democratic society that we want for ourselves? Right? Is it a truly democratic, free, and open society if you have all of these disparities, particularly around healthcare? So that's one of the issues I want to look at. I'm also interested in education and how Native women think that we should be educating our children, both on and off reservation Indian country land. So I'm interested in all forms of how democracy plays out, but particularly interested in activism, health, violence, and education.
Right. I remember where sometimes activism and violence went together, unfortunately, some of our historical situation. Now, as we look at this incredible list of accomplishments in your career, do people sort of get stars in their eyes when they talk with you and sort of forget that, you got a lot more to share rather than these wonderful awards? I mean, do they lose sight perhaps of Sarah Deer and all the glitter?
Well, I certainly receive a lot of very kind, outreach to me over social media, with my friends and family, and then with my colleagues at KU. And everyone is really supportive. I kind of sometimes feel a little bit like, why, there's plenty of other viable candidates for these awards, and I'm flattered, but I wonder why we're not seeing a wider breadth of Native voices that are coming through at these national levels. And I want to support the effort to recognize and honor and offer money for some of the amazing work that's being done, because most of the work being done in Indian country by women is largely unfunded. And I think that's a mistake. I think that funding these grassroots efforts is part of the trust responsibility of the federal government, and they don't fund tribal nations to the extent that's needed to truly change and improve our democratic tribes.
We hope that your profile of Native women will come up with a few candidates and nominate them for some of these awards.
Yes, and I have been.
Okay. Well, that sounds like a wonderful time. You've made us so proud, lining up these major significant awards that have come your way. We're just so happy to hear of those. And this one almost caught me off guard, and I almost missed it, but not quite. I managed to fix it and get you here on the radio. So we want you to drop by and say hello again whenever we get things back to normal. I understand still that the festival has been postponed, so won't see you there. But
I may be down in the Dustin area in early July.
Let me know. We would love to have you come in and chat with us on our program. So
wonderful. 2,000
Meadows, Sarah Deer, we're so proud of you, and keep up this incredible work.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me on your show.
Okay, that's Sarah Deer, the 2020 recipient of a Carnegie Fellowship. So we want to say congratulations to her. Catch us next week, and we'll be back and we'll have a little more Mvskoke Radio. You've been listening to Mvskoke Radio. Join us again next week for more local, tribal, and community news and updates. But